Hi everyone, today I wanted to talk a little bit about Itta, a game that I have owned for a while and I completed back when I purchased it but recently went through it again. It's a somewhat hidden indie game that very much plays like, I'd say something like Hyperlight Drifter by just looking at it. As I haven't played Hyperlight Drifter, it also at the very least feels a lot like Enter the Gungeon, which is a pretty good roguelike in case you didn't know. However, this is a story-based boss rush type of game and it's pretty fucking cool. So I'm here to talk a little bit about it because it's really dope. So let's just get into it. So the gameplay of Itta is relatively simple as you unlock new weapons by just finding them and taking them to the smith. You use WASD to move and you shoot user mouse 1 and you dodge user mouse 2. And as such you're gonna go through the land between, or what is most likely a form of limbo, and kill different guards, or well, not exactly guards, but people that have decided to sort of pray to a specific god. It's complex, we'll get into it, but that's sort of the gameplay loop of it. It's super satisfying and intense, as it is a bullet hell, meaning there will be a lot of bullets. However, in comparison to the usual bullet hell that is super difficult and takes a lot of practice, Itta is fairly new player friendly, as you have a very generous amount of iframes. Obviously, you need to know what an iframe is to use them, and I'll fully admit on my first playthrough I got super frustrated as I didn't realize I could simply dodge through 90% of attacks in this game. There's practically no attacks that I could find you can't just dodge through. And that's really necessary because very often in Itta, the entire room will be filled with bullets, with other enemies, with attacks that you have to avoid at all costs. As you don't have a lot of HP in Itta, you have in between 3 to about 5 HP at most of the time. You'll have to find the different health unlocks. There are 3 total. You start out with 2 HP. And as such, you'll evolve your character and make it, easier as you go. You can also get double the amount of health that you have from red hearts, which you can find around the game through either killing black spirits or just interacting with different objects. It's really that simple. You'll get these red hearts, which are like the black hearts or anything else in like Bind of Isaac or whatever. They're like one-time use. Once you're dead, they won't like stay with you. You'll have to find them again. And that's sort of the thing, right? So you'll go through all of these different boss locations. Sometimes you'll get the red hearts to have a slightly easier time there. I use them a lot by the end. And then you'll go through and you'll kill the boss. There might be some attacks that you shoot to, counter. But otherwise you'll just be spam dodging and shooting with all of the different weapons, of which there are quite a good amount. You have your cannon, you have a pistol, you have a auto rifle, a flamethrower, a scythe, a sword, and a shotgun. I am especially fond of the shotgun and auto rifle. I highly recommend playing with them. And to blend all of that in, you have a very unique story and a unique world, which I will be talking about. But for right now, I think it's just important to note that the art style really elevates the entire thing, because in most games where you'll like go through it and you'll end up at a boss fight, you'll defeat the boss and not think too much of it. In Itta, because of the way everything works and the fact that you are playing effectively a child, again, a part of the story that I will get somewhat into. Again, I won't be doing super spoilers, but I will be talking about it. Because you are playing this child and the way that the enemies die are often super gruesome, or either that or they just implode. Either or, and the implosion is honestly the most preferable thing, I feel like, but it ends up giving it a very unique feel that I haven't found in a lot of other games. And Itta isn't a super well-known game, unfortunately. I think that's a huge shame, as it is super fun, it's super skillful, and it's one of those games that I honestly don't understand doesn't have more community around it. So it's also part of the reason why I'm creating this. So let's get into the, general art style of Itta. Alright, so talking about the art design in Itta is sort of interesting, because it has this ethereal feel that mods such as the Ether mod in Minecraft has. Because in Itta, you see, you're dead. So you are in a sort of limbo-like area of, well, life, or whatever you want to call it, the spiritual realm. You're in a limbo area where you sort of see everything has gone wrong. People are dead, your entire family actually is dead, and your cat has called in a spiritual protector. At least that's the story I like to go with. You don't really know who called it in, but somebody did. I like to imagine it being the pet because that is super cute. And this spiritual protector, takes the form of the cat, which is what's following you throughout the entirety of the game. You explore 3 different areas in total. You explore the normal gardens where you start out, then you have a sky area, and then you have the below earth area, if it's so to say, right? And it's very unique, all of them. The sky area becomes a lot wider, a lot brighter, because you're literally in the clouds. A lot of it is covered in clouds because you are again in the sky, so it makes sense. The boss arenas remain largely the same as they are throughout the entirety of the game, which is fine. It's a usable arena. And the down below area, like down below in the caverns, right, everything feels a lot darker. It has a lot of darker tone, and the music adapts to that. In the above area, it's sort of more bright, more, I don't know how to exactly put it, but like this ethereal tone that makes you, sort of just zone out. Whereas below in the tree area, it has this kind of cutesy good vibe to it in the garden, as they called it. And in the lower section, it has this industrial metal clinging sound that as far as further you go into the game, the more it gets distorted and mixed up. And the reason that is because you are a child actively killing other people. And in the game, one of the things that the game tries to convey is that killing isn't good, and how the main character is affected by it. They become more isolated, they have less thoughts, if that makes sense. Like, you see your companion talking to you and you just don't react to it. Things are just dead. And you see all this death and destruction around you that you are directly the cause of, because you go in with your shotgun and blast the shit out of them. And this sort of affects the main character in a way, and it's shown throughout the story in a really nicely done way, in my opinion, where every time you die, at least at certain points when you die, because if it's your first playthrough, there's a good chance you'll get unique death animations and a little bit of story tidbit about how the main character feel, because they're stuck in this loop where they cannot die. And a good example is that there is a character that you meet at a slightly later point in the game that's hanging from a bridge. He's been hanging there for more than 100 years. And you talk to him and he's like, well, I can't die. So he's just hanging there and has been hanging for 100 years until he just stopped caring about anything. And it becomes this sort of game throughout the entirety of the thing. It reminds me a lot in story-wise, in kind of a lot like Everhood, actually, where the characters have just stopped caring and you're there to sort of end their suffering. What's interesting about it is that it came out in 2020 and not a lot of people talk about it. And a lot of people talk about Everhood partially because Moist Critical played it. I think that introduced it to a lot of people, including me. But either doesn't have a huge community around it. And it makes me wonder why, because the game is really good. So that being said, we've talked a little bit about the art, we've talked about the gameplay. The next major thing is the music. So how does it hold up? Alright, so the music in Itta is very good across the board. Most of the music, especially for the overworld areas, fit really well into them. They add to the themes of the areas, they add to the feel of the areas, and most importantly, they add to the feel of combat when you are fighting the big bad bosses. Because while in the boss fights they can sound similar at times, being there is a lot of the same tunes being played and the same rhythms and so on, or once some of the later bosses in the game, but it can feel quite similar at times. However, that's not a bad thing, as the music slaps. It hits really well for what it is. It fits really well into the boss fights, and that's what's important here. It adds a lot to the vibe, especially the final boss, which I won't explore or I won't show anything from. So I'm just gonna give you some music from one of the basic boss fights. So give it a listen and let me know what you think in the comments. Now, to quickly cover on the basis of the story, so we talk a little bit about the theming of the game. I think it's important to mention that, as I've said before, in this game we are technically dead. We are playing as a dead child. We don't know what happened or why we died, but we wake up in this strange garden, and as we explore around, we find out that, well, we sort of have to kill some not so sane people to progress our story. And you go through kill some not so sane people so you can get home and open the void gate. Now, as the name suggests, the void gate isn't exactly what it turns out to be, and you sort of continue through the game like that. I can't really spoil too much more of it, otherwise it would ruin the game itself for you, and I don't want to do that. Needless to say, this game does touch on things such as resurrection and infinite life, and what it means to really be alive, if you have infinite life. Because a lot of the characters in this game, like we have sort of touched on before, have lived for nigh on 100, 200 years, and they're wondering, what's the point anymore? They've done everything. They've lost the people around them, because in this world, you aren't exactly invincible. You just don't age, and there are things that can hold you for relatively ever, but you can die as well. And that's the thing, and a lot of the game sort of touches on that. Like, if it's morally okay to kill people when they are completely out of their mind because they've been living for forever, or if it isn't, and what the effects would be of that. And as such, the game does have an ending that I think is worth covering. I also think it's worth, if you're playing it, going through the Shepherd's story, just because it's really cool and honestly really worth your time. So that's about it for Itta. I think it's a pretty cool game that's definitely worth your time. I think it's super cute. I think especially the collectible cats, they're awesome. It's so dope. I love it. It's such a cute game. I think it's really worth your money. I think it's worth investing in. It's also a super big indie game, so, give it a go. Check it out, especially if you want to support the dev who honestly deserves it. So, with that being said, have a very nice evening. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time with me today, and I'll catch you all later.